back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons, and monsters and serpents. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and we are coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 Tangent Cube of Science, where we are nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. This week we have another guest that's joining us, not in studio, joining us remotely. Dan Friday, glassmaker extraordinaire. He came to Egypt with us. And he came to Egypt specifically because he was looking like we're going to talk about this on the show, but he was telling me like, I want to see the oldest glass, you know, some of the oldest glass work ever. And so it was great to have him there. And, you know, he's like an expert at what he does. And it's cool because on these tours, you get people from so many different walks of life, and their expertise comes out often during the tour. And this is one of the reasons why we want to have him on, because he has a unique perspective on some of the artifacts and just some of the stuff going on. So Dan, welcome to the show. Thank you.
Welcome, buddy.
What's up, boys?
Long time no see.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, I've been keeping up with you guys. It's great that, you know, even if we're not in a room together or virtual like this, I can see that you guys are staying after it too. And it's so great watching like your guys' work in London. I feel like I'm kind of along for the ride in real time. And for me, this stuff is like, you know, I mean, it's not paradigm shit. I mean, it just seems so crazy that we're on the edge of still yet there's more stuff to learn about the world or how things are made. And it's super cool.
Heck yeah, man. Well, I appreciate you following us, and we want to know how's it been going with you with the glass making?
Yeah.
It's been good. It's a unique thing to do. It's definitely a niche thing. I'm you know, I was a mechanic in another life, and I owned a tow truck as a kid. I was a real hands-on person, but when I saw glass making for the first time, I just knew that that's what I was going to do, and I've been doing it for about 30 years now. And it's a crazy, you know, I'm highly unemployable except for making glass art. I think that's why I work for myself. But yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your path in that, because I know that you brought, when you were in Egypt, you had brought some books with your portfolio, and there was like this museum and everything that was created, and then your Native American heritage and how it's all connected to your artwork.
Yeah, and you know, that's kind of the voice of my work. I'd say it's like an intersection of glass and, like, you know, I come from an oral tradition in the tribe, and I kind of manifest these three-dimensional works in art out of this really permanent material, which is not historically available to like Coast Salish people. My great-grandfather was a really famous totem pole carver, and you know, most of his totem poles I've returned to the earth. There's one in front of the courthouse here that's fiberglass, but you know, these people that, you know, a lot of the tribal people in America, you know, they were just on the verge of the Bronze Age. You know, they were just barely smelting copper. And so this is largely this Paleolithic society with these oral traditions and that intersection of glassmaking, which is like heavily documented all through, you know, Egypt, the Mediterranean. The big hub for many years was Venice in Italy, and now Murano, and then Eastern Europe. But it's so well documented. The Black Forest in Germany was burned down to fuel the furnaces in Venice.
Really?
I shared a picture with you guys, and it's one of my favorites from the Corning Museum, and it's the bust of Akhenaten, and it's one of the oldest pieces of glass that we know about, of like actual glass.
All right, I'm going to share that.
Yeah,
we'll pull that up real quick.
And they think, you know, they can't date that the same way either, but it's you know, it's 3,500 to, you know, almost 4,000 years old, and is that's the one.
That's it. Yeah.
But it could have been made yesterday, because even though glass is like a super fragile material, it just has it just like granite, there's a record of it. Even if it shatters, it stays there. Whereas like the artifacts of my culture, my father's culture, or like my grandfather's artwork, it literally has like an ethereal, like it's like an ice sculpture, like a totem pole just kind of goes away eventually.
I see what you mean. Yeah, the glass is just like, it's just silicate, and it just lasts. It's, you know, it doesn't, I mean, it might break, but it doesn't turn into something else. It doesn't degrade into or mold or, you know, rot.
The same way.
Yeah.
and that's, largely what we're, and it's not a stone, but silica. And so faience is actually the precursor to glass. And that was invented
Wait,
in
what? What is it called?
Faience. It's how it's
Are
pronounced.
the blue tiles
Yeah.
down in the under the step pyramid? That's
Oh,
some kind of glass. It was faience,
yeah.
right?
Yes. And so that is what they figured out before they figured out the chemistry of glass. And it's this, it's a quartz based, uh, or like a quartz core, but it's like fired like it. So it's not really ceramic and it's not really glass. Like when you glaze a ceramics, glaze is like from the French word for glass. It's like glass fused onto the surface of ceramics. And the Egyptians figured out, yeah, that's just pure glass. Like
Look at that. God.
soda lime glass is what we call it, or soft glass.
It looks like it might have been gilded with gold at some point. See,
Oh yeah,
there's
it definitely had inlays and stuff you can
Oh
see.
yeah.
I mean, just as somebody who makes something too, it's like it's so hard. Just and when I went there, it's I started with the Hancock books and watched a lot of your guys' content, Ben's stuff, and I really did go there to see the vases and this really old stuff. But it's like it was a great like double, these parallel paths where it's also the my life I've dedicated to glass pretty much, so it was like yeah, it makes sense to go there.
Well,
But
yeah,
just
there was. I mean, I remember you telling me, like, dude, these were some of the first glassmakers ever that
yeah,
are known, and it was, and
yeah.
you're showing us these pieces, like, oh my god, this is that's really cool. I
What
had
was
no clue.
what was the place near Sudan that we went where they had the not where the vases were in those pictures in that back room? It was towards the end of the tour.
Oh, the Nubian Museum is that what you're
Yeah,
talking about? In
and they have like
in
this
Aswan.
Kushite glass there too, which is
Yeah.
just like, oh, it's so sick. And people, just again from a glass perspective, I just thought it was really, that was really cool.
what
But
was the period when it was first um, being made in the Americas? I
uh,
didn't know that
you
they were
know,
really making.
I think, as that intersection I speak about, like of the native history and then the glass history. So some of the first glass furnaces in America were actually in Jamestown, Virginia, and they were specifically to make beads to trade in the plains with the natives
Mm.
because when people there's kind of a not a move there's a museum show I'm in right now, traveling around the country called Clearly Indigenous. It's going to a bunch of museums and it has about 40 Native American glass makers, which is kind of unique because it's such a I didn't know there was 40. But they always talk about art and glass and the recent advent of native voices in glass. But I would argue that the first native glass artists are the first people that did the beading and the really exquisite beading, which is all through the plains and hill country, like by where you guys are, all the plains Indians up into the Minnesota and the Midwest and
Mm.
all
Were
those
the
the trade beads.
So this was in ancient times, like pre-contact?
No, that was the settlers in Jamestown,
Jamestown.
Virginia,
Okay.
in like the 1700s created furnaces to make beads. So
Okay.
sorry about that.
So
No.
so
I think you said that, but I wasn't sure because must have gotten confused because I thought you were telling us this was all. I guess you were talking about Egypt when you were talking about how old the.
yes,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
The glass stuff here that's pre-Columbian would be natural glass, like obsidian.
Yeah.
Is basically a natural glass, and
Yeah.
they prized it, but I don't think they knew how to make.
Yeah, those are works of art. Those Clovis
Oh
points.
my god, yeah, the
Yeah,
stuff that
man.
they did with obsidian is and other.
I think what the show that I'm in, it's more like contemporary art glass sort of angle, but yeah, it was
Have
just
you
so
ever
cool.
have you ever tried? I would be cool to do that. Like make some beautiful like a nugget of colored glass and then nap it
Yeah,
into
there's
like
people
a
that do it
Oh,
exquisitely.
yeah.
There's a guy, I don't know, he's on Instagram, but yeah, they call it like a billet, just like a raw like
Yeah,
block of glass.
a billet.
Yeah, billet of glass, and
Okay,
then just
yeah.
nap it down. And so actually glass is the thing that they can make the sharpest
Yes.
on
Yeah.
the planet. So they do eyeball surgery with like a flakes of obsidian because you can get it like woofer thin, like just and it's like your eyeball when they cut it. It with something so thin, it like starts to heal as soon as the cut is passed. Like it
Yeah, yeah.
because it's such a fine cut. And we were talking about the faience. I loaded another picture in there, and I just thought that it was crazy. I don't know if I just heard the guy Dan Dedunking. He's from Washington State too, and he was on the Rogan show, and they were talking about faience and the baboon that like they used as a clock in Egypt, and those were made of faience. And so I think faience, like I was really just kind of cool to go see it. I loaded a picture of it, but it's kind of neither here nor there. But it's cool to just hear it kind of. People are talking about this stuff, and other, there's so many different channels and avenues to find out more about this stuff, like what you guys are doing.
Yeah. Let's see if we can find this image.
I'll look for it in a high res.
It's from the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and it just sort of looks like
baboon sculpture,
a blue thing, yeah. And
not baboon, finance.
Not finance.
I don't know how to spell faience.
It might be in the Dropbox thing I sent you to.
We see it, but Kyle's looking for a higher resolution version.
Okay, yeah.
How do you spell faience?
I got it.
F-A-I-E-N-C-E, faience.
Wow, there's quite a few.
There's a bunch of them.
Yeah, and so that's how they would tell time. So like one day, it would just like they'd fill it with water, and then it would just pee out.
There it is.
That's how they kept the marker of time.
Water clock. Yes,
water
it drips.
clock, yeah,
It drips at
that's
a
what I was gonna
specific.
say.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, I'm gonna pull
Yeah, but even so, just talking about just the history of glass and the beginning of it, there was just so much more there in Egypt too. Just like, I love the artwork as an artist. I love the artwork of the dynastic Egyptians, but the earlier stuff is the stuff that is just like, it rings like a bell of like question mark, like what? And these earlier, as a I've spent thousands of hours of grinding glass. I spent, and just knowing how glass is so much softer than granite or schist or corundum or any of these inclusion sort of things. I use abrasives or diamond coated things to grind things flat. And then when you guys are doing that work, like when you guys are at the Petrie Museum, just those measurements, I heard like, was it 4 microns or some just, out of imperfectly round? It's like, that just doesn't even happen.
Yeah, I don't remember what the...
with abrasives and just something that one of the guys said on the tour, I'm not sure, it's like, it might have been Chris, but just, well, we don't have evidence of the tools. I feel like the vases are evidence themselves. They're like it's like a 3-dimensional witness mark of something that could make something that round.
There's a lot of people, that don't. I don't know. They're really arguing the point. It's a big debate right now. Yeah. Like is the precision an indicator of specific tools, or can it be done by hand? And there's just seems to be a big crowd out there that's like, yes, it can be done by hand.
I'm in the not by hand crowd.
Me too. But hey, look, I'm not a manufacturer. And I don't think the people that are not manufacturers, or the people that are manufacturers, are in the it can be made by hand camp.
No, they're almost exclusively in the it can't be made by hand. Like,
yes,
Chris King is the only one I know who says, well, you could do it with simple lathe-like tools.
Simple tools,
but
and
he's
simple
like, you're not
bearings,
gonna,
and
simple,
wood, and,
he's like, you could have wood and like leather and some like lard or something.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with that.
And make a bearing, and I'm like, okay, bro, I don't know if you're gonna be spinning a 5-pound piece of granite on your leather bearing, but
your wood.
I think for me, it's like, I'd like to see it done, because I think it comes down to like the rigidity of your moving parts. Like, how rigid can the moving parts be? If they get wobbly, then I would imagine you're not going to end up with something very precisely round.
Well, okay, so that's like a couple things. And Chris was my other great buddy on that trip. What a great group. I love the thread. It still just like chirps on, and I'm like, good times, man. You guys were great hosts. That was amazing.
Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Who hasn't go now before it's not available, or you won't regret it. But my take on that, as like cutting things with lathes, and like I never cut things to the precision that, Chris is an absolute perfectionist, and like he makes his own ball bearings because he couldn't source a bearing maker to be as accurate. Like historically, it's always been like German bearings are like the best, but there was like discrepancies in his order. He's somebody who's taken those kind of measurements. My son is also a machinist, and like again, I've worked with cars, I've gapped spark plugs, I know thousandths of an inch, I know like moving parts and metal and joining faces. My son's point, I showed him, and he's a tough nut. He's not even like, you're so deep, Dad. Like I'm not vested, but his point was that the armature to hold whatever it is, if it's spinning, how could it be abrading? And if it's cutting, not just the spinning, not just the precision of the spindles and the shafts, but any sort of armature, because that's where all the force is transferred, is at whatever's holding the fucking tooling. You know what I mean? Even if you could get it on a fucking lathe, secured out of some like Fred Flintstone wooden shaft lathe, you couldn't hold something against it with your fucking finger and make it cut like that. So you need like an armature, and it's not going to be wood. It's just not.
Wood's going to give. Yeah.
Oh, dude. Or, like, could it be done by hand? I really, Karoly showed me I don't know, talking about other people, but the guys online that, and it took us 2 years and it wasn't accurate, let's scan that thing. Okay. If that's your debunking, you got to put it up on the chopping block for full analysis.
They scanned it. I don't know how high of a resolution they scanned it at. But they did talk about the scan. But the thing that I thought, or we had discussed this together when we were in London, and basically they used a turntable. It's like they didn't want to cut it by spinning the work like a lathe. Mm-hmm. But what they did was when they went to check how round it was, they used a turntable.
They put it on a turntable to check roundness.
And spun it to check roundness. And then they went back and ground on the parts that weren't round. So
yeah,
it's kind of like, well, you just used a lathe just to check roundness instead of to cut it.
I guess they used the turntable as an instrument of metrology, but
as opposed to the carving instrument.
But then it just completely leaves out the inside of the vase. The wall thickness, that's where the debate is. Like,
that's
did
true.
You make something perfectly round? Cool, man. That's a good story, dude. But did you make a fucking wall thickness even within a fucking, thousandths of an inch, dude? Did 0.4 of a micron? Is that what I heard Ben say, dude?
I don't know of anything that I can't remember the numbers, but I don't know of anything that's within 0.4 of a micron.
Well, that's
4 microns maybe.
4 microns or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's less
4
than
microns is like the size of a yeast cell.
Yeah, that's almost at that sort of level. And then if you get like one thing circular, to get it concentric and matching and perpendicular, like again, like whatever sort of like what my son was saying, the armature to hold the tool, whether it was an abrading, like it held something against it and there was an abrasive between. Okay, how fine is that? That would leave scratches that were, I don't know how you guys have done with the guys in Florida. I like that video, Russ, of you guys in Florida.
Oh, yeah.
But there would be abrasive surfaces at that level. You know what I mean? You'd be able to see, was it abrasive or was it cut? And how do you cut through two different materials? Like, again, maybe you could pull up another one of those pictures. There's a couple of like the Palomar lens one.
Okay, yeah, we can look at the Palomar lens. Yeah. So what you're talking about is with under the electron microscope, we didn't, in some cases there were like large tool marks, but there weren't a lot of evidence for microscopic tool marks, which was really interesting.
Well, and it would be like, we know the rough cut tube drill, like we were finding the core. Like in the very center and the bottom, like, okay, they roughed it out with a core bit, but just the even wall, like what sort of armature can hold a cutting surface or an abrading surface inside of that piece? And then like in the Egyptian museum, seeing those the vases that were the size of your thumb.
Yeah.
Like, let's scan
the little
those
tiny thimbles.
Yeah. Because there's a thing, like size matters. Like, You know, it's almost easier to make some things bigger than like what sort of tool can get inside of a constriction when the mouth is only open an inch and be so firm to cut against something, you know, like that makes a difference. You know, there's like in making glass, there's like a sweet spot for the size. Like too big is astronomically crazy and too small becomes too difficult and it's fragile. And there's like a sweet spot. And I just wonder if those vases, I don't know what there's like a medium range, but like seeing those ones that are like, I mean, it must have been the size of my thumb, and it looked like it shared all the similar geometry. And then my favorite part of those vases, the ones that we saw underneath the pyramid, were how no flat angles, but no planes. I mean, but how the lip came so far past down the shoulder, and it didn't ride parallel, but there was a void in there. You know what I mean? That like as they've scanned it, it's got a little radius in there, it's still round inside there. Like what is doing that, you know, like what can go? And then there's also a thing when like things, you know, I like the vibration theory about the cutting thing, but like when you're spinning something that fast, it's like to cut into it and have such a thin, that lip be so thin and not just snap. I mean,
yeah, you're talking about the thickness of the tube drill, whatever that tool was itself. The actual thickness of it?
Or I'm talking about in like if you were to cross section it, and so there's the shoulder that comes out and down.
Oh yeah.
But then there's the lip that flares over and just creates that little tiny negative. That like to me as somebody who makes something that's like, get in that's the. Where's the gap fat there, dude? Like that, the tiniest little.
Yeah, yes, and you know when we were in the museum in the UK, there were those two huge bowl vases, these massive ones, and one of them had an enormous beautiful flat lip, but it had a deep cut into the underside of it too.
It's hard to do.
I mean, you imagine you're spinning that and you're just waiting for it to, you know, the whole thing to come off. Yeah, because it's a deep cut.
Oh yeah.
So I think we spent a lot of time in London discussing, you know, the possibilities of manufacture. I spent a lot of time talking with Chuck, too.
Chuck, yeah.
And we were talking about
before we went, right? The February tour, right?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, I heard you guys talk about him.
Yeah.
Well, I can't see a way that you can cut that stuff. I think it's abraded, but if you have two spinning, you got a spinning tool and you're spinning the work. Then you don't need to spin the work very fast. You can spin the work kind of slow with a fast spinning tool like a grinder.
But the faster you spin the stone piece, the stronger the cutting piece has to be. Like for that to also be spinning, I don't think
so. I think that
that's why he's saying it's grinding.
You're not cutting it. You got a
It's
grinding
abrasion.
disc going one way, right? The grinding disc is going this way, and the work is going this way. So your grinding disc is going to wear down while your work's wearing down.
Creates more friction to have the piece spinning. I mean, you can't feed the thing to be cut into the cutting thing. I mean, there's what we're talking about is like, again, if we're talking about vibration and frequency, we're talking about this very sweetest spot of, you know, the deeper you get in, the more it's cutting. Like, I mean, that's just a fine tuning.
Yeah.
But this goes into,
I think it makes more sense than cutting.
Yeah.
Because with the different inclusions in the various stones.
Yeah.
With a grinder, you can grind right past the hard ones and the soft ones and at the same depth.
Well, when you're grinding things, you start with a more abrasive, more scratches that don't show up on a microscope. Crazy.
Yep.
And then you go down to
work your way till it's super fine.
pumice. You go to pumice, and then you go to cerium. And cerium, it polishes things by friction. And what blew me away by about so many of the things that we touched in Egypt was the amount of polish, or like it just takes so much friction to polish something. And especially
some of that granite looked like you were looking into it like a little ways.
Well, and
you're
then,
like the surface you're touching is not actually what you're looking at.
Yeah.
yeah,
There's like a force field there. Yeah, a polish field.
Yeah.
Yep.
Pretty
Well,
incredible.
and
Let's look at these.
We talked about vibrate. You know, like we have the. I thought of this too. What if you rough cut a vase like you're talking? You're using a spinning grinder. You have the work itself. Let's say it's, you know, you got a big ball of granite, and you have it on a wheel that spins sort of slowly, and you've got a grinder. Maybe the grinder's on an arm, and it's, you know, you're moving some levers up and down so that it's doing some kind of actuated, pre-programmed, mechanically programmed movement. You get it rough. Then you put it into a vat of sand that you're vibrating, and you just let it vibrate for a month.
Yeah.
And it polishes the whole thing.
Just put it in a tumbler.
Yeah.
An ultrasonic tumbler would just make it
polish
perfect.
The hell out of it.
So they call that a recipolap, and it's a lapidary thing where it just vibrates and cuts.
Yeah, okay.
And so could we pull up that Palomar lens picture? Is that possible?
Yeah, we'll pull it up.
Got it. I got a few of them.
There's a few of them, yeah.
I pulled up some on the internet as well, but I'll pull up the one you...
Whatever you got. There's a couple in the ones I sent that are, I don't know if the resolution is great. Yes, okay. So that's the Getty Images one. You can kind of tell for scale. So a couple things about it. It's the largest. It was made in the 50s. It's the largest telescope mirror lens. Glass needs to anneal, which means it needs to cool down to room temperature. And they found huge things in the desert of glass that are huge. They can't tell if that's where the furnaces were in Egypt necessarily, but they found these giant, you know, they're trying to sell all this knockoff glass everywhere we go, but it's not the stuff. But to cast something like this took probably years of engineering. It has like a honeycomb structure for strength so that it can cool down. And
what is this? Is this a cutout from the bottom side?
No, this is, so you're looking at it from the top. That is the reflective, that's going to be the mirror surface. It's
like this.
Yes, and that's the piece of glass, and it's mirrorized with a tiny, tiny bit of aluminum. But they had to polish that. And so by polishing
you can see the structure down underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just as a frame of reference, just know that glass is super easy to polish compared to granite, or how it was everywhere in Egypt. There's that other picture I sent to the Dropbox of me touching one of the sculptures at, not the Ramesses, in Karnak. And it's like polished on the inside of the skirt up between its legs. Like the granite, they just had the ability to polish it. It's crazy. So
I don't think we have that picture.
Yeah, I don't see that one.
Well, yeah, okay. Don't worry about it. But just know that the Palomar lens took 13 years to polish.
Woo!
That's crazy.
You know, and so you think about like they just abrasive by hand this thing. I'm like, man, no, they didn't, and make 40,000 of them. You know, you know, it's just like I don't know how many vases there were. That's a big number, but I mean,
that's the thing, is it seems like there were probably a lot more than that, because
so crazy.
that's the baseline. It's 30 to 40,000 that seem to have been there was evidence of beneath the step pyramid, but they haven't even finished excavating all those tunnels.
Yeah.
And the last time Kyle was there with the Artifact Foundation guys in Ben, with Karoly and Adam, they found basically what they were calling collapsed magazines. In other words, there were whole sections of the tunnel that held a bunch of vases that had collapsed, and the vases were just sticking out of the pieces of them sticking out of the walls. So there's more of them still down there.
Yeah.
So there, Adam was saying the number may be closer to 100,000. Who knows how many there were? But you're right, 30 to 40,000 is already a whole lot of these things. Even if like let's say only 10 or 15% of them are the extreme precision ones, it's still a lot of these vases.
Well, and when the Dibble reference is like, well, they must have just had an industry, so they made them so much faster. This one that they've recreated that doesn't really cut the mustard as far as the dimensions, which that's the thing, the dimensions. Like anyone can make one look like it. Just go to any gift shop. The amount of 13 years, like working on that thing every day, polishing it. And just as a little side note, when they cast the Palomar lens, it's at the Corning Museum of Glass, where that the bust of Akhenaten is. I've studied there quite a bit and had residencies and such. But they annealed that, and there's this thing when it's cooling down to room temperature, we'll talk about stresses of glass. It removes the stress. So like tempered glass, tempered glass is like when it fractures into a million pieces, that's because there's a stress in the glass. So when your windshield breaks and it breaks into a bunch of little pieces, it's so you can go through it and it doesn't slice you in half like an old car window would. So
Okay.
annealing it removes the stress, making the glass stable. And so this took over a year to anneal in the oven to cool down. And there's this thing where, you know, if you open the oven early or break it, you know, they broke the first one and had to start all over again. So,
Oh god.
and then just add that to the 13 years of 12 to 13 years of polishing this lens with power tools, you know, like the best power tools, you know, that science has to offer. It's just as a frame of reference for
Yeah.
that sort of
And
stuff.
then you've got these statues that are just like enormous, and the whole things were polished
in
Yeah.
between the toes, and it's like
in between the toes, man.
it's crazy. Yeah,
Nobody polishes giant statues between the toes.
yeah. Well, and then when you talk about like the abrasive thing, you know, and the cutting thing, is it cut? Is it abrasive? And then in your trip to Peru, Russ, and those videos, I just think there's something that we don't know that just it doesn't add up when you look at
I
the way
agree.
the stones are fit together.
I got it.
Vibration? I'm not telling you that they're floating these things up.
I got it.
You know, it
It's
just
a new theory. It's the glass polymer theory. They were glass blowing those walls together.
well, and I don't even know if it's like this gets into the thing that I wanted to talk. You made a couple references. So that annealing process is what relieves the stress in glass, and you can cut glass. It's really cool how you cut glass. You know, you put a little scratch on it, and it creates this stress that you can run the crack through the whole piece of glass. You were talking about how the surface of the stones in Peru were kind of flaking off. You know, like there was like a crust kind of
Yes.
popping off, and the way they were like eroding. You know, and I don't know if it was something that had to do with heat, because I know that's what glass is done with heat. There's a couple videos in there. I guess we won't pull these up, but there's one about a Rupert's drop, and it's such a cool
Oh yes.
scientific thing to see.
It's
you know.
incredibly strong unless you break the tail, right? It's like
just
basically
very-
impervious.
You can, there's a 20-ton pressing
Yeah.
down, and it puts a little dimple in the face of the press.
Yeah,
And then
it
you
ruins
just
the press.
touch the tail, and it and like do yourself a favor and then go watch the slow motion HD of that. And it again, it's like, talk about vibrations and frequencies. That tiny little chain reaction of a little snap at the tail, it just travels. It's super cool.
The stress gets released through the whole thing, right?
Yeah,
that's
so
the
cool.
idea. You know what a Rupert's drop is?
I'm about to get this podcast ruined by playing it. No, let me go look and see if I've seen it.
It's a glass formation.
Yeah. It's
And
highly.
they look fragile as hell. Look, yeah, you can see them down there. They look,
I'll pull up an image.
yeah,
and they are fragile as hell.
incredibly
on one
strong.
tip. Well, because it's
Unless
like
you
this
break the tail.
Because
Here we go.
spherical shape. Like the sphere is like this natural shape in nature. It's like the strongest form, you know. The sphere is spheroid, you know.
Okay, we can't get busted for showing it.
No,
Just
no, don't worry about it. But something about it, like whatever was, you know, like I said, no answers here, but just something like when you have those mating surfaces on the inside of those stones. I put another picture in there that I just pulled off. One is of that same bend in the wall that you took, Russ, in Peru, and then the other one is of some other. I don't know if it's the argument or evidence for geopolymer, but it seems like they're just soft.
So wait, let's go back to this Rupert's drop. You seeing the picture I'm sharing?
Yeah.
So while the press has all this force on it, you snap that little tail back there, and it just
there are videos
hit
of
it with
people.
a hammer. That end won't break. And so inside this little picture, which is kind of cool, if you see inside the sphere, there are these bubbles. So it's a solid piece of liquid, and it just cools so fast that the outside. This is what I was making the comparison to the stones. The outside freezes, and the inside is under just this massive like molecular shift. And what happens is these little bubbles form. These little sphere, like little bubbles form inside the glass, and they kind of liken that scientifically to like how potential, you can't really see it very well, but when glass cools rapidly, the phenomenon of gas bubbles like forming inside of it, they liken to the forming of the universe, how these spheres of planets just sort of come out of this massive stress. So if you were to take this Rupert's drop out of the press, it just survived 20 tons of downward force. You take it out, and then you just grab the thinnest little tail, and it's so fragile, you just snap it with your finger, and the thing doesn't just explode, it like is close to vapor. It almost like vaporizes. If you watch it in slow motion,
because of these bubbles, like the little bubbles that are inside here, basically just blow
it starts
up.
a chain reaction that runs down the
It
tail.
releases the stress in a chain reaction. But but with this press, it's so impervious to that particular press,
so that
it'll destroy the head of the press. It'll put a giant dent in that metal.
So it's under its own internal stress.
Yeah.
The stress is pushing outward on it, but it's holding itself together in this thing.
Yeah, and if you break the tail, it sets off a chain reaction. The
House
thing
of
just
Cards
turns
comes
into dust.
down, and it just and you got to do slow-mo HD. It's just
it's wild to watch these videos of these things.
Yeah,
take all this, like you can hit them with a hammer, on the front there, and
it's one of the first things that you can do in a glass. I mean, anybody could make one. You know what I mean? When we get together at some point, if I come to one of those events, we do a mobile glass thing, we'll make a whole 100 of these things.
Okay, good.
I gotta see one of your events. I watched a tiny little. I think it was a video of you like working on one of those fish.
Oh yeah. There's the YouTube. The internet knows how to find the things.
So freaking cool, man.
I think with the Netflix thing, that really kind of brought glass. Now there's glass shops. Kind of, we're going through our own little renaissance in the glass world, sort of thing.
Really,
that's cool.
It seems like it. But so the story behind the Prince Rupert's drop is Prince Rupert had a daughter or a wife or somebody, he didn't want anybody sneaking down to her room at night. So he lined the hallway with the Prince Rupert drops. And,
whoa, that's genius. Anybody touches it.
Yeah. It's like the alarm bells,
Man, that's kind of cool. I wonder if you could.
Glass.
Can you make me some of these things?
Yeah, dude, you're going to make them.
Okay.
Anybody can make one. It's pretty simple. You just take molten hot glass at 2,200 degrees and drip it in cold room temperature water. And as soon as it's a drop, like a drop of water, glass is just liquid, it freezes, but there's still so much internal stress built up by such a rapid thermal exchange, that it's.
I gotcha. Yeah. So the outside puts the inside under stress, and then oh my god.
And it's just wild how almost invincible they are unless you break the tail.
Yeah.
That's what really blows your mind.
I love that kind of stuff. Yeah. I absolutely love that. Thank you for bringing that to the show.
People will absolutely destroy a hydraulic press, the metal parts of it. It'll put a giant dent in the base and a giant dent in the press.
I gotta
the piston, and then you just dink.
I'm doing this tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, hey, did I hear
I'm busting out the torch. I'm making some. I'm gonna put it in the press. We're doing this.
Well, and I heard you guys got. You got a mill or a Bridgeport or something too?
Yeah, we have a Bridgeport milling machine, and we have a Monarch lathe.
No, that's what's
like a really nice lathe.
I told my son, I'm like, we've been looking. Like, dude, $100,000, I'll get you a lathe, because he builds race car motors and
cool.
just blocks. He decks and blocks.
So I was
like that.
I was cleaning up stuff. I was just arranging some stuff and moving some stuff around, and there was one box of stuff that was still hadn't really been unpacked in the machine shop, and it was a little grinder motor with a grinding disc and a little protective cover mounted on a big 90-degree block of steel with the slots in it where you can connect it to the lathe.
Oh,
I'm like, holy crap. And so basically you can plug it in this little grinder and you can position it on one of the, where you would put your cutting tool on the lathe.
Oh.
So I can use the grinder So anyway, I was just like, all
So
right,
you can. It's
it's
like,
on.
is it what is like an orbital locking mechanism?
It's yeah. I mean, you've got slotted bolt holes through it, so you can bolt it down to the. I don't know what the proper terms are.
Yeah, I'm trying to
But
think.
it's basically like the cutting tool armature or whatever you would call it. It's really a plate that moves back and forth in this way and that way on the lathe. So you can put your work there and get that spinning, and then you have this thing that's adjustable by cranks, and some of them are automatic where you turn it and it'll move back and forth like this. Well, on that is a way to bolt things. And this grinder you can set on there and bolt it down onto it and turn it whatever way you want.
Yeah, okay.
And then you can move it around on the turning lathe.
Yeah, and
you can grind. So I was like, this is perfect.
It's like finishing work too, like
you can try grinding on a. Basically blowing up pieces of stone in there by making huge mistakes. It's gonna be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well, you said
you wear some armor.
Yeah, I know.
The two cutting surfaces. Well, they're seriously, dude. You don't need to go down the YouTube like lathe accident wormhole like those.
Oh no.
Man, you got to see one.
Some things you can't unsee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to. No.
Dude, like the big chunks of wood, and that's just again, I'm getting a little off topic. So the things, but I'm just trying to think of like what it is. There's just something I think we don't know, like how the faces of those. This is what you were mentioning. If they were hot and the two stones in Peru came together, how did they not fuse? I was thinking that one would be cold, but I still don't understand how you turn stone to like a receiving marshmallow pillow type.
I don't think you can
structure. Yeah, I don't either. But I also don't know how.
The problem is it's not like quartz isn't quartz and many other stones. They're not like glass in that sense that when you heat them up to melt, especially if it's a conglomerate of a bunch of different ones.
Oh yeah.
If you heat it up to the melting point, it expands. It boils, right? It's not like getting soft. They all have different melting points and different crystallization. There's all these different thresholds. So one of them gets hot and starts to basically try to outgas stuff while the other one still hasn't even melted yet.
Yeah.
So that's why you end up with stones like pumice whenever there's magma, which has the potential to be a granite or something like that if it cools like deep underground, right? Or it can turn into glass, or it can turn into all kinds of basalt.
Yeah.
But granite is like an abyssal. It specifically has to form deep underground under high pressure, cool extremely slowly.
Yeah,
over a long period of
and
time.
that allows some of the various different elements to separate and attach to their like atoms. So you get silica and you get.
Well, and I think that my understanding of the granite that forms like deep in the ground is that's the granite that they would cut off the stressed surface to get to the good granite.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like the stuff that at the edge that crusts and cools weird and didn't anneal right or whatever.
Well, yes.
That's interesting.
In my understanding, there is no such thing as granite that forms on the surface or anywhere near it. It all is deep, deep down. Like think like in a cooling magma chamber, right? Like like down below the chamber that feeds the magma to a volcano, like when the volcano gets choked off and that magma just sits in there and slowly cools over, and then you end up with something like Stone Mountain. When it reaches the surface, it's this giant dome of cooled material,
So the problem with
but he's right. You have to
you got to slough off all the crap near the surface because it's gotten torn up. And
but I'm not a geologist.
I'm just going back to this. Without that in extreme pressure that's holding that ball of magma in, it would just turn into like if it rose up closer to the surface, it would expand and then it would explode and then you'd have a volcano.
Yeah.
Because
you get basalt.
And then the stuff coming out would either be like pumice because it's coming out and foaming up and then solidifying, so it's full of air bubbles.
Yeah.
Or it's a like a deep layer of magma that's rolling across a landscape, and so the stuff underneath becomes columnar basalt. The stuff on top is like the Hackley basalt.
Well, yeah, it definitely takes on a different structure, and my
It's all about the pressure, right? It's all about the pressure around it, helping it form into a good crystalline formation. Or if there's not enough pressure, it just sort of expands into foam.
Yeah.
Well, again, I also am not a geologist, so I just will put my foot in my mouth. But
that's what I'm doing.
We're all of us.
Join me.
Yeah.
Well, the vases, I got my hands on those. I touched it with my own hands. I needed to do that. I'm a tactile person. I got to see those stones in Peru. I got to go to Sacsayhuaman. I got to see that sort of stuff. And that just seems like, so when you were showing the space in between the stones, how it like had a curve and like there's no flat surfaces on those either, and how they're joined.
Yeah,
it's like,
none of it's flat.
And it's so artistic. Did it have a function that it just wouldn't vibrate? Maybe it's this earthquake proofing, but whatever it is, there's just still like, how would you register? How would they fit so tight? Like, how do you take a jig, or is like one arm riding on the surface while it's cutting the bottom of the next stone to go on top? But then it's like when you showed Russ that it's like it's almost like a channel. There's like that lip that
Yes.
It doesn't, maybe aesthetically they're meant to look like they were a liquid. You know what I mean? Like that's.
But that's the thing. That lip and the depression where the mating faces of the stones are, especially like the one on top of the other.
Yeah.
No one sees that.
I know.
So how can that be aesthetic?
Yeah,
because what they see is the seam on the front.
I think he means that the aesthetic of the entire wall is like they wanted it to look like it was kind of melting or something, like the whole thing.
I'm talking about the stuff that's inside.
But you're right. You can't even see that. You can't even see it.
Well, I'm also talking about that. That seems like a function. To go to that length, it has a function, right?
It has a function. I think it's the result of a particular process.
It's a result of a process.
It's like they didn't engineer every join. They did a process that resulted in each join being unique, but the process was the same.
Well, and that's not like whatever 12 angled stone. And when they come to these three-way intersections, and it's not like they're three-way intersections that are all along a plane. Those positive and negative bevels, like, I mean, it's just so complex to think. And then they just punched out so much of it too.
Yeah, it was. What you see when you're standing there actually looking at the wall, especially when there's blocks missing, is that it isn't just the complexity of this surface, but then if you take that whole wall and you turn it this way, the same complexity exists along this plane.
Yeah.
And if you turn it again in the z-axis, the same complexity exists here. Everything is curved. There's no flat surfaces anywhere on any of the mating faces. They all twist slightly or curve inwards. And it's all matching. You're just like, okay, this cannot be conventional stone cutting. It just doesn't make sense as conventional stone cutting.
I'm like, where's the YouTube of the guys trying to make just 3 of them? You know, what I
know, right?
Just do 3 of them.
Yeah.
Shut us up.
Yeah. And what was funny, that famous 12 angle stone, and there were people, we were trying to look at it, and there's a constant crowd around it. That whole alleyway is full of people and people trying to sell you stuff, because they know that people are coming to look there. But so Matt and I are around the corner looking at some other part of the Inca Roca Palace or whatever, and this girl comes up, she's like, there's a 13-sided stone over here. And we're like, what? So we go, like, sure enough, there's a really complicated stone with 13 sides. And she's like, no one comes over here and looks at this one. I'm like, well, that's, whatever reason this one got famous. But yeah,
can't wait.
Yeah.
They're trying to sell me something. Do you have razor flat joints to sell me?
Yeah.
Because that's why I'm here.
Yeah. You know why I'm here. You know why.
You got nubs?
Looking for nub, dude.
Looking for nubs in all the wrong places.
Good. Yeah, and when you're walking down the hill, Russ, in that one video, and it's like, oh, look, it's just right here too. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Or like Kyle, you were like, yeah, that looks like that one keys into the other. Like it almost looked like a hole in a peg or something. It seemed like was it massive?
That must have been Matt Shy.
He must have been Matt. Yeah. Kyle wasn't on this trip.
I didn't get to go, but Matt went. and he has long hair.
Yeah.
No, but you were talking about it in your last episode.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's like it sort of looked like it was just the foundation with everything else like blown out or gone.
Oh yeah,
And it's like a hole, and then there's like a keyway. It looked like there's just off to the side there's another stone that has a very similar round like peg male female sort of like slot and groove.
That sounds like Puma Punku or no. Yeah, they were just laying down and they had
when you were just walking down the hill, Kyle too, and you're like, or Russ, pardon me, and you're like, oh, they're just everywhere. Like, oh, look, there's some more stuff over here in the
they're everywhere.
It's just everywhere, It turns out there's the middle of the city. The whole city's built on top of it. It's crazy.
Yeah, but Cusco and Ollantaytambo were like that. Just you're walking around, people are going about their lives or whatever, but you're surrounded by Inca stuff, and the Inca stuff is on top of this mysterious other stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes when you go out to the site, like you go to Sacsayhuaman and you say, oh, the city's around this Inca stuff. The Inca stuff is around and on top of this other stuff. And this other stuff is actually sort of enclosing and like venerating something even older and weirder.
Kind of older, kind of more mysterious.
Yes. No hieroglyph. You're just like, holy crap. Yeah.
No hieroglyph.
No writing. Same thing with the ancient stuff in Egypt. There's nothing written, there's no glyphs except for maybe the Sherman stone, but that's still up for debate if that's glyphs or not.
Yeah. And the glyphs, and like, again, that's why I bring up as an artist, like some of my favorite artwork, one of my favorite artists is Alphonse Mucha. He was a Czech artist, really like kind of the father of like Art Nouveau. And I'd say I can just see some similarities where he borrowed so much from the dynastic Egyptians, because I really do love the art and the way that things are like just the prose of it, the way it's kind of set up. But then like the Osirion, dude, like that place, you feel like I'm in a magical thing,
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, and then there's just like, I don't, not to attribute the flower of life, I don't know where that comes in, but it's just so different. And not to, again, it's that whole debate. You're not taking anything away from the Egyptians but they're just almost like two separate things. I don't know that one didn't beget the other, but they're just so different, Yeah.
Like,
no, it's just completely awe-inspiring. And nobody really has like a monopoly on history, like no culture, not to use sensitive ground. I like to think we all go back to this bottleneck of when only 2,000 of our ancestors survived. We're all like descended from this like tiny gene pool to what we have all over. But this, how it's,
the Tonga,
like something here that's like the shared history of humanity that is just amazing, that like,
what is that? What is it? It's like 70,000 years ago, the Tonga volcano, something like that. It like bottlenecked us down to 6,000 people over and on the whole planet.
Yeah, I heard it was
so all of us come from those guys.
Yeah,
you're right.
Holy crap!
Everyone.
Yeah, or just the younger. All this stuff. And it's like pretty. It's a crazy time to be. I remember this was so. I don't know. It's just great that we can. I mean, the power of the internet, that you can find people that you like to talk about these things with. What I mean? And sometimes I run this by people, and I'm like, "Right, get it?" And so other people are like, "No, not at all. It's whatever." I'm like, here I am. I could talk about this forever, dude. So who knows?
Yeah. Sometimes I try not to talk about it because I'm just like, that would be really weird if I brought that up in this moment right now with these rando people.
I mean, what the hell though, too? It's like, it's just sharing. People are what's important in this world. That's one of the things about the tour that was so great, was spending time. Obviously we've got stuff to talk about, but even that work, just Kyle, I loved seeing your family there. And your kids.
Oh, thanks, man.
That was real powerful for me, man. Like I just, I've got young kids too, and man, we tried homeschool. We sucked at that. We tried, like unschooling, or and obviously COVID and online learning. My daughter's been to every kind of school. I'm like, this is
Oh
what a
man.
great education for your kids too, to see that, and just spend time with everybody in the tour afterwards. You guys playing music, that's like, I don't know if you mentioned that or share that about, but that's such a great part of that.
I appreciate that, man.
Yeah, man.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
thanks, man.
You guys are really sharing a lot of yourself, and that's super generous, and made the trip just, it was just amazing, So
Awesome. Well, I mean, I feel the same way. Like, I don't know, by the end of pretty much every tour, it's just like you've become really close with pretty much everybody on
yeah,
the tour, and it's like, I don't know, it feels like a big family or something.
Yeah, there's
and
like a trip of a lifetime bond that
Yeah.
happens.
yeah,
Yep.
And
Everyone's connecting on all of these interesting topics, and that leads to other things and leads to just all kinds of connections between everyone. I feel like it's great. And then of course experiencing some of these places with these groups, and every person is engaged, they're interested, and it can just be magical. Like, I don't know.
and like, on what other trip can you end up like drinking beers at 2 a.m, playing pool, and having a rant about the Anunnaki building pyramids? Like, that just doesn't happen on
Yeah.
most other kinds of vacations.
it's awesome.
Well, and you're sharing it at such a special place. I don't even know, like, when you were talking about magic, like, just all my life having, I've spent hundreds of hours mentally reading and thinking about Egypt, and just to be in the king's chamber, just that,
Oh, man.
I don't go full woo, but and I mean, I'm sure if you've been there 100 times, like you're used, if it's another tour or something, but there's something for me. I mean, just that feeling is just like, you can't. When I read the Hancock books and like the Hamlet's Mill, I even read that, like, Anunnaki, like Zachariah Sitchin.
Yeah,
I was just
Sitchin.
looking
Yeah,
for
bro.
any information on this stuff back in the day. I'm like, what is this? It allowed me to, like, just sort of imagine, you know what I mean? It's like, whether or not it's true, we don't know. Like, and then I saw your guys' trip to Turkey too. There's just, I mean, my bucket list just keeps getting a little bigger.
Man, I have to say that the King's Chamber, and kind of like, I don't know, you're making me think, like, yes, the mystery of it, and then all of these possibilities. Some people are debunking everything and whatever, fine, but the possibilities are wider than we can imagine yet.
Yeah.
As to how this was done and who the people were that did it and all that kind of stuff. Even if the mainstream story is basically right, we still don't know their exact methods and their mindset and all this kind of stuff that they were about. And so there's so much mystery. And when I went, the first time I ever walked into the King's Chamber, I mean, it just literally blew my mind.
Yeah.
Because it was sort of a culmination of all of this stuff, and to come into that room and to realize, I mean, just it's enormous, and like the magnitude of this space and the craziness you have to go through to get into it. It just blew my mind. It's still, man, yeah,
it's an
amazing.
enigma, and the energy it took to make it. I don't know if it's all. I mean, I'm not going to say that it's all like psychological, like all the things that I've read about it, but like when I went in there, you're underneath. It's just a magnificent place. I don't know if I was like having some flashbacks or hallucinations, but I felt like in the middle of it, like when I looked up, I could see the star. I just felt lighter. I have chronic back pain from lifting heavy things my whole life. And I had an energy. I don't know if it's adrenaline that I was in there. God, I came out of there, my back didn't hurt. I felt like revived. I'm not like, I didn't have like short of saying that I had a spiritual experience there was just something about the energy there that I'm like, man, you are in this place. There's so much you don't understand, like, you made it here. You know what I mean? Like, that was a big thing in my life,
Wow.
to think about this place, even if it's at a very small level, like this, my psyche, the psychology of it is like, wow, you made it to this magical place, man. I just felt so good coming out of there. I was like, you're just kind of riding a high, you know what I mean? Like, it was, I'd recommend going. I wish I could have climbed to the top with Graham.
I know.
Back in the day, you know what I mean? What's
Well,
that?
you know, I think it is a spiritual experience, and it could be for any number of reasons, but I do think that there's like whatever that chamber is, it's central to the whole structure. It's clearly like it seems to be the reason the structure exists, right? Everything sort of points at it. So it's like when you get in there, you kind of are. It is some kind of experience, and it's interesting because Ben is like not woo at all.
Yeah.
But even he has has the feeling in that structure, and the only other place I've seen him like that was in Peru at the Puerto de Hayumarca, or the Amaru Muru gate, the portal that's cut gate into the
inside the
and like he said the same. You're like, we're out there and we're just like, this thing is weird. It isn't precise, right? But it's this beautiful, like somebody came and specifically cut a flat face out of this weird. First of all, the geology is really strange.
It's all turned vertical.
All the layers are turned vertical, and they've eroded in this strange way, and it leaves these thin, like they're not they look like a razor edge rock sticking out of the ground, and it's 40 feet tall. It's not razor edge, but it looks like it. They're real thin layers sticking.
That's not the thing that they said flipped upside down, right?
No, that's at Sacsayhuaman. That stuff is also weird. Anywhere where you found that that old stuff is really the Hanan Pacha is really strange. There's a place called Napo Iglesia where you basically climb. We went into this valley, and there's basically enough room for a road, a river, and some train tracks at the bottom, and then the mountains just go up like this on either side of that stuff. And you climb up this way, and there's all these Inca terraces and this long staircase, and you get up there, and there's an overhang, and it looks like somebody's cut an A-frame out of the side of the mountain, and in that is this beautiful inset in the wall with a Inca shaped door. Mm-hmm. It's just, you're like, what is this doing up here? Why is this even? What is this? Like, what is it? There's nothing else up here.
There is things like, when some of the things that I think they attribute to like ceremony, I'm kind of like, okay, sure. But there's other things where I see like that spiritual, like I feel like just infinitesimally small, like a grain of sand on the beach. Like I'm just one man in this very flash of an eye lifespan that I'm going to have. And I'm looking at something, I don't know how old they are, but they seem old as fuck, dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like they're I'm like, oh dude, my little blink of existence, the fact that I got to stand in the king's chamber, get inside the box, make make this connection, it just, or the things in Peru that I've only seen on the screen. Like it really did look like it was flipped upside down. What did you think about that, Russ?
That is a big piece of stone. It looks like.
Well, you wouldn't want to just cut in at the base of a giant stone like that, right? Because it might just fall on you. Right?
Yeah, it looks like a natural part of the mountain that somebody carved a bunch of stuff into, and it's been broken and rolled over somehow. It's very strange.
Yeah, it did. So you think that it did probably roll over?
I think so. Yeah, But but on the other hand, there's enough weird Hanan Pacha stuff to where you just say, I don't know. Maybe they wanted it to look like this. Yeah. I can't tell. There's at the base of the Sun Temple area in Ollantaytambo, there's another Hanan Pacha thing, and I'd seen pictures of this on it's got the 3 long, wide scoop marks in it, like a ramp of 3. You know what I'm talking about? I've shown this before.
Yeah. They look like ruts almost, or cart ruts, but just 3 long ones going straight.
That's right. And there's doesn't seem to be anything else, just this, right? Well, that is actually a humongous piece of stone just sticking out of the ground. The Incas built their terraces up to it's like their terraces sort of encompass it. But I looked around and it's an erratic, like it tumbled down the mountain. Yeah. So it's possible that those things were carved way up there and it broke off and rolled down.
Oh.
Or that boulder rolled down and somebody carved those things onto it while it's laying there. And then later the Inca built their terraces all around it, but no one moved that boulder. It's been lying there for a long time.
With the stairways upside down and all that, were they near that thing?
No, that's Ollantaytambo. That other stuff is Sacsayhuaman and Cusco.
Oh, okay.
Right? But it's the same.
Maybe it was like up at the top of the mountain. It was like one went this way and the other one went that way.
Well, that's the thing. At Sacsayhuaman, you are at the top. So it doesn't seem like there's like if it broke off and rolled somewhere, you're like, well, where did it come from? Like we were basically at the highest point, you know. But it does look like if the whole place got shaken, or this is the other thing.
Could it be connected?
This
to
is the other
bedrock?
thing. If glaciers moved it.
Oh my god!
And that's what's weird because that area, you know, that area they have the thing called the Inca slide, and it's supposed to be glacially carved. And dude, that whole section, I walked all around. I'm just like, what is this? I'm less convinced now that that's a natural feature than I was before. I thought, yeah, you know, this sort of
the
wavy
ground was smooth. I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's polished in some cases, and people are like it's polished because people like to slide down it. I'm like, okay,
No.
maybe.
Come on.
Yeah,
Well,
that's the explanation for the polish.
Well, there's another thing that like Peru adds to the mystery, and like so the mysteries of Egypt are like, okay, how do we push these upriver, these giant stones? We've like debated like so when these guys first set eyes on them, like Vase or Petrie or what's the guy that Ben has the book of like Tiahuanaco, you know, that out of print book.
Is it Poznansky?
Yeah, I think that might be it.
I think so.
But they're just their first, you know, and like, oh, is this 17,000 years? Like it's,
Yeah,
we all know the riddle of like, how did they move this stone? But it's like when you're talking about those steep hillsides and peaks and over mountains and like just the riddle, I mean, it just becomes such a complex, I guess it's a riddle. But like, that's like kind of like been this age old debate. That's what's so cool about the vases. It's like, God, this like came out of nowhere. This wasn't even like really questioned that long ago, but it also has the same sort of like mystery or fingerprint to it where it's like, it's just kind of inexplicable how they did that. And so I just love that there's something that's also so very small that points to these questions. That Poznansky, that's
Arthur Poznansky. Yeah, that's him.
Yeah, that's the other place, and that I really want to go. And I don't know who it was that posed that like it looks like these stones were just like blasted like away,
Yeah.
or like how did these statues incarnate? How did they just like I don't know, you know what I mean? But you know what cataclysmic thing happened? You know, I mean, you don't. There's this book I read, you know, when I was reading Sitchin, like a grain of salt here, just total let's just add this to the sci-fi file, but it's called Spear of Fire, and it's supposed to be transcribed from some scrolls, and it explained a global war between the South Americans and the, you know, like this global society sort of thing. And,
there we go.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, again, has a lot of these things. It probably came out in the Von Daniken era. It was, you know,
I love that kind of stuff. I don't care how factual it is. It's great to read it. You're just like, yes.
Yeah.
Well, it just like puts a character, and it's obviously a novel, and like, you know, it's one person's interpretation. Like, but just to think about like what, you know, how like you said that like the stone, like how they've survived, like, you know, it would, or what does it take to shift one of those walls? They're just so heavy. I like how you pointed out in the video. I put a slide in there of just those snaking walls. Like it's just, you've got to build so much more wall to make it. Those things were just built. All these things were just built to withstand. Like, what's the point? You know what I mean? Like, it's so much effort, or it was no effort, or you know, whatever it was, some way they had of doing it was totally feasible to make it twice as hard.
Yeah. That's the thing is you can kind of understand the quote, it was built by demons, right? It doesn't look like humans did it. And when you're walking around Sacsayhuaman looking at those walls, you're just like, okay, I cannot even start to come up with a concept of how this was done in any kind of conventional way. This is why I started thinking about the Hutchison effect, right? Mm. Like I cannot buy a chemical method for making these kinds of stones into geopolymer. I'm sorry. You cannot pour granite. It just it just doesn't work chemically, right? Now, if there's some kind of weird physics,
anti-gravity.
well, that's what I'm saying. Like Hutchison, if what Hutchison was observing was a real phenomena, he seemed to be mixing radio waves and electromagnetic something. He was
modulating electromagnetic fields with like high amplitude radio frequency.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess they're basically the same thing.
It's all in the same spectrum, yeah. But he was using magnetic fields.
He was doing something weird,
and he like fields and waves, and he was sort of the intersection, and then materials would do strange things in those intersections. Sometimes the material would completely transmute into something else. Other times it would just become fluid when it shouldn't be. And then as soon as you remove the effect, it ceased being a fluid and went back to being its crystalline state. In other words, you could fluidize it without
heating it or whatever.
Right, exactly.
It wasn't going through the normal chemical process of phase change.
That's right. So it was like
disassociating the atomic bonds in a material.
Yeah.
And so again, because you guys referenced that in the last thing, and that was the thing I couldn't remember what it was earlier. We were talking about, and so is that what you would call the geopolymer?
No, so the idea of a geopolymer is like a concrete.
Like concrete. Yeah,
yeah. Like you have
Hutchison is like a radio wave.
Yeah, Hutchison is using unknown physics.
Yeah. Okay.
To do like anomalous things to materials, and one of the effects was the floating, right? So like they would begin to there's videos of a bowling ball or a cannonball like levitating a little bit, and then there's other videos where he has a bar of metal and the bar starts to move around like a snake while he's hitting it with the effect. It's like moving around, and then like he'd stop hitting it with the effect, and you would see these as it re-solidified, it would crystallize in like it would leave these long, like almost columnar basalt formations in the metal as it hardened, in this aluminum, and he would mix wood and aluminum. He would like meld them together.
Wow.
Where you could drop a piece of wood into aluminum and it would just be part of the bar, which you can't do that if you poured it, right? Because it would burn the wood. Like strange stuff. So you're causing some kind of phase change without using temperature, without requiring pressure.
He like sets a butter knife down on a piece of metal and starts messing with it, and the butter knife's kind of like sliding along, and then it just sinks into the metal.
It just drops into it.
Just like, and then it stops.
Yeah. Yeah. So if either there was a time period in which the sun was doing this to the whole planet,
and it would disintegrate stuff. He would sit there, and it would just like a bar. It would just start to like sort of come apart, like
it would dustify.
Fibers.
Yeah, fibers. Yeah,
would just peel apart of like solid metal bars. It was weird. Not melted, not hot.
Yeah,
they weren't burning the surface they were sitting on.
I mean, it's like unknown physics because of my lack of understanding of any of it. And like I try and listen to like physics way over my head, like Hop vibration, torids, and I don't know what a plasma is or if it works in the, you know what I mean? Like I like it. I like trying to learn, you know what I mean? Like, but I don't know if there's unexplained. It does seem like there's just something unexplained, like
that's what I'm saying. So
yeah,
it's possible that there's like there basically is a time period in which this may have been occurring on the surface of the planet in sort of random waves, right? If it is some kind of high energy radio frequencies combined with fluctuating magnetic fields, then if you go back far enough in time where we have a stronger magnetic field on Earth and it's going through fluctuations and the sun is doing something weird and emanating high energy radio waves, then you might end up with whole areas of the planet which for a couple of months things are really strange, right? And then you end up with like frogs stuck in stone and whole walls that sort of melt. I don't know. Or maybe an ancient culture learned how to generate this.
Yeah, with their wooden tools, they figured out how to move these stones up the side of the hill. I mean,
that's the problem is like you have to you have to have a high-tech culture in order to generate this process. Though the other possibility is that it happens naturally sometimes and people take advantage of it.
You know, and then the time.
But you still have to move the stone.
Yeah.
So they had that ability.
Yeah.
Or just humankind shared the earth.
This would also explain cartwrights.
Like
I think
the descendants of Viracocha came down and
yeah.
we're sharing the earth with gods. There's, I mean, for lack of having any answer, those things are, again, I come from an oral tradition. There's a lot of stories and there's a lot of like meaning that are, it's like Aesop's fables. Like we've all had stories to teach us like how to live, whether it's the stories from the Bible, Gilgamesh, wherever these stories come from. There's a great story online, one of those YouTube videos I sent that we won't play, but it is of the chief of our tribe, Chief Salit, and he was a big time like culture bearer for the language. But one of the oldest Lummi stories, I sent you that article of 13,800 years ago, Haida, Guay, kind of before the Bering Ice Bridge. Whether or not that's debatable, but that the sea level, the village under the water is 400 feet underwater, dating it to about 13,800 years ago. Well, one of the oldest stories of our tribe it's called the Survivors of the Flood, and that's what our people call themselves, the Cheshuswahalitzin, and it means, the story is there's two boats, get on a boat and they survived the flood and they washed up on a mountain. And it's an old Lummi story. Lummi is this tiny little community from the San Juan Islands, tribal community, Paleolithic community. And this is one of our oldest stories and the identity of our tribe, the Cheshuswahalitzin, and the people of the Northwest are all come from these two canoes is the story, And,
wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's
washed up on a mountain.
Yeah, washed up on a mountain.
Is there a bird in the story?
Well, yeah, the raven. Yeah, and we also have the thunderbird is also winged, feathered, sky. You know what I mean? It's
dragon type thing.
Yeah, the thunderbird, mythical.
I was just wondering the thunderbird, thunder eggs.
Yeah,
we have that.
You want me to read this? The story is in here. This is actually really cool. Yeah, a Haida story from the book American Indian Myths and Legends.
Oh, which one is that? The Haida one?
It says it tells of a great flood that forced people to move. So this is in the Ancient Origins article that you sent.
Oh, yeah. So that's the one of further down in there. They're also, so we're not Haida. That's in northern Vancouver Island. We are just across from southern Vancouver Island. But this whole area, this is that's called Southeast Alaska, northern BC. We're Coast Salish, but these communities they've all been divided into tribes, sort of along this like divide and conquer sort of treaty signing thing that happened. But we are akin to the Haida, we're seafaring people, and to travel a couple hundred miles in a canoe a day was not strange. So they're cousins to us, more or less. But yes, that story, we all share a similar, especially in oral tradition. Like the story changes a little bit, but the stories,
the gist of it's the same. Yeah,
yeah.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
So how do you? Do you want to go through the article first?
Well, I could. Yeah, I'll just get the highlights of the article. So he sent this to us. It's 13,800-year-old Haida site found underwater in Canada. This is from Ancient Origins. Estimates of people's presence in the Americas have ranged from about 12,000 to 50,000 years, but a new study by a team of archaeologists that has been researching the subject has found a site dating back 13,800 years. It is now underwater in the Juan Perez Sound off of British Columbia in Canada. This area they examined was once dry land. It was inhabited by the Haida people. They have an old flood tale on Frederick Island that tells of how the peoples became dispersed into the New World. Frederick Island is a different site than the one that was recently studied. So farther down, they have part of this story, the Haida story from the book American Indian Myths and Legends. And the story says, the old people, there's an excerpt from the story, which tells of a great flood that forced people to move. The old people told them to stop laughing at the stranger, but at that moment, the tide was at low ebb, and the woman sat down at the water's edge. The tide began to rise, and the water touched her feet. She moved up a little again and sat down. The water rose again, and again she moved back. And now she sat down at the edge of the village. But the tide kept rising. Never before had it come so high. The villagers grew frightened and awestruck. Having no canoes, they did not know how to escape. So they took big logs, tied them together in a raft, and placed their children on it. They packed the raft with dried salmon, halibut, and baskets of spring water for drinking. The woman kept sitting higher and higher on higher ground, and the water kept climbing. The waters covered their island, the Haida story says, and hundreds of survivors were adrift without anchors. And again, quoting from the story, by and by the people saw peaks sticking out of the ocean. One of the rafts drifted to a piece of land, and its survivors stepped off there, while other rafts were beached elsewhere. It was at that time that the tribes became dispersed. And this is based on a tale related by Henry Young in 1947 and repeated in 1953, called The Spirit of Haida Gwai, or the Black Canoe.
Osium.
It's really cool.
Osium. Yeah, my good buddy's Haida. And it's our stories are different, but they're the same. I mean, like I said, it's like you start to see a pattern here, and I'm just a simple human. But yeah, they're super powerful. And
can you tell us like your story? Like, can you give us a synopsis of it?
The Shashashwahalitz, the Shashashwahalitzin, and it was the same thing that he got a message from the bird to build they get the canoes, they get as many men and women as they can in the canoes. They survive. I think it was a month they were in the boats, and just when they're out of water, they find land. People were at the edge, and they were kind of tasked with repopulating the area. And it's like, if you like clams, you go over here. You like octopus, you go over there. And they form these villages. And our village, there's, like I said, that mountain that they've recently found the bison on, kind of like the Boneyard. Orcas Island, San Juan Island, the San Juan Islands in the Puget Sound, or the Salish Sea. Those are, those mountaintops supposedly are where the village of the first man, Swatan, is from, of the Lummi people. And Lummi is just the name. It's short for Hueclami or Lahaktamish, like people of the sea, the salmon people. The tribes are largely formed by the signing of the treaties, but these are like nomadic people, seafaring people. And again, a lot of the story is very similar. They survived the flood. And
what I find interesting is sometimes the story is the bird or the eagle comes and warns them, and everyone's like, "Oh crap!" and they start building the stuff, and everyone's freaking out, and they get on the boats. But other times the eagle comes and people are like, "Yeah, whatever." Yeah. Like, it's bullshit, and the eagle's like, "You're annoying," and the eagle leaves, and then almost everyone dies, but a few people believe the eagle and they escape. It's like, So this one that I just read, the Haida one, is a mix. People are like, "Wah, this is crap. Nothing's gonna happen," and she sits down, and then she has to keep backing up and backing up and backing up, and then people are like, "Okay, now she's sitting in the village, and the tide's all the way up here. We have to build rafts." Like, it's a mix of the two. Like, they don't believe that.
You almost really wouldn't have time. Like, when you see like Tsunami, and when they talk about Randall Carlson's, and I love the Spokane. Have you guys gone to the Coolies and the?
Oh yeah.
If you did, yeah, dude. So my son lives in Wenatchee, and I really want to go on one of those Randall tours. But like Kennewick, that's in Eastern Washington, and that's Cooper's Ferry, Kennewick, man. That's 21,000 years old. And the Colville people, my uncle's Colville, the DNA testing, like Native American people are super skeptical of DNA analysis, but it's part of science that we are using to date everything, and it works when it uplifts their story, but when it upholds another story, you're like, wait, the South sweet potato came from Australia to South America, like, or the other way around. It's like, how does that happen? When they use genealogy to date anything. So back to the stories of like the Salish Sea, there's a couple pictures of some of the anchors.
That's what those are. Yeah,
that's what I wanted to get into. I'm like,
necklaces. They're really symbolic to me, because it's like an anchor is like a metaphor for being steadfast or held down in a place. there's a couple of there's one that I do that's like there's a 12-foot. So on the top right there, that's an actual anchor stone from Susha Island. And so
Yeah, that's
when
freaking
I
rad,
was telling you
dude.
guys earlier, like my grandfather's totem poles and much of our history and culture just sort of like erode, like it's all Paleolithic, it's all woodworked stuff that just kind of erodes over time. Well, when we were trying to fight for our fishing rights, and now that they find that village underneath the sea outside Haida Gwaii, now that archaeology has moved underwater, like hopefully Yanaguni can be explored, they find these anchor stones. So this is actually not finished. This is going into the Gates
This
Foundation
is beautiful, man.
next week. Yeah, or 2 weeks,
This
and
is amazing.
yeah, it's like I think it'll stand 8 feet, but this is about 12-foot tall sculpture.
Wow.
And so that's just one of the anchor stones, like the necklaces I gave you. And so the anchors,
Dude,
after they
this is
do the
made
art,
of glass right here. This is like
that's bronze, and that's 12 feet tall.
it's
Bronze.
bronze.
Yeah, that one's
Are you
bronze.
making this?
Yeah. Well,
Oh
I
my.
hired a foundry to help me make it. If you click on, there's another one of mine that's in glass. But the rope I make out of cedar bark, traditional rope style. It's at the bottom right corner.
Yeah, these
Yeah,
are
that is
freaking
beautiful,
awesome,
dude.
man.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
And so I make these stones out of glass, but they're just meant to represent the anchors, like you saw. And but they find these lanes in the channels of it's called the Schwalla or the reef net in Lummi culture. They find these reef net lanes all through the San Juan Islands, and that's kind of like our marker. Like as we're trying to reestablish some of our fishing rights, it is these things are paramount. These like stone effigy, these things made in stone, just how glass will last millennia, just how those things in the Osirion, dude, like those stones are so old. I don't need a carbon dating to like you're just like or you're just like whatever it is, it's like my lifetime is a grain of sand in this,
Yeah.
I love the quote. I don't know who, Graham Hancock, it was time only fears the pyramids or something like that. And
Oh yeah.
and it's just like these things are just so old. So and I just love old stones, and so that's some of my artwork.
Yep. I want to see.
unrelated,
Let's look at some more.
Yeah, yeah. See
unrelated
the fish.
The fish too, because so here we go. We got the seafaring tribe. You guys have like an ancient flood myth, and you're
Yeah,
making
there's some
these
salmon right there. The one you
these
were
these
just
stones are like legit artifacts that are found that are associated with your people. This is and these are the salmon.
Man,
Yeah.
look at
so these are
These are so rad.
that.
yeah, they're life-size salmon. Some are a little bigger. This is at the Seattle Aquarium. It's a big blown glass bubble, and then I add a clear head on it. And it was one of my biggest like public art things that I have done at the Seattle Aquarium. They just redid the waterfront, and it was
God, those are
a big stuff for me. So
awesome,
there's 3
dude.
of them. There's 33 of them in the whole
Wow.
in the whole entryway there. So it was a big job.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I didn't share a whole lot of images of my work. They're redoing my website right now. It's
So can you
Friday.
describe what it's like to make one of these? Like a little bit of the process,
Yeah,
like how.
yeah. So the stripes you can see in the salmon's body, those are called cane, and cane is basically just like a rod or a dowel of glass. So like if you think of a cane as like a dowel of candy, like a candy cane, uh, I've put the design work on a bubble with cane on it, and then on a separate pipe, I gather up the head and stuff it into a cup, so it has like a tiny little veneer of color on it. So it's a solid head and a blown body, and so I take the bubble and I join them together. That's sort of the seam where the head and the body are made. I blow it up, shape it. I stick a pipe on the head and then finish the tail. And that was kind of the short and dirty version. There's a million videos on YouTube you can go see. Of not a million, but there's quite a bit of you can go down the glass wormhole on YouTube too. Corning Museum does a great job. I'll have videos on my website, Instagram. There's like, Instagram, I could just watch glass blowing all day. And it's because I love it. And it's, again, to me, it's a lot like the Egypt thing and the vases. Like once you see it, like, I don't know how everybody doesn't just, and once I saw glass blowing, I'm like, how come everybody doesn't love doing this? It's, I love the process. Yeah. This is called a mountain bear. That's called Cuomo Colchan, and that's the shiny mountain or Mount Baker, which kind of overlooks the San Juan Islands where I'm from. And it's just a small sculpture of a bear about,
Wow.
14 inches. And it's kind of it's hard
That
to
is
photograph
beautiful.
glass. I pay a lot of money for someone to do that because we've already seen how technically challenged I am. So,
But that is beautiful. It's like the silhouetted mountains with a sunset or something.
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know what the sharing capability is. I have a website that has more, or Instagram. If people want to see my work, the internet knows how to find
It's
it.
just Dan Friday on Instagram, or
Yeah,
what
just
is
Dan Friday on Instagram or
cool?
FridayGlass.com.
Yeah,
Friday
open
Glass.
up the thing with all the salmon in it.
Yeah, that's a school of, I think there's like almost 40 salmon in there. That was from my museum show. I gave you the book from the museum.
God, that is.
Yes.
Look at that.
Yeah, that's it's a lot of work. I love doing it.
How big are they? How big are they?
They're life
Uh,
size.
some of these are 36 inch. I mean, it's a big for a piece of glass to me made by hand.
Yeah.
Like
Bro, you need to make us some Clovis.
yeah, dude. Yeah. Well,
Right.
I know a guy,
3 foot long for some of these.
Yeah, come on.
They're just giant.
I just
Make some colored glass like that and then nap it into this beautiful Clovis point, and we'll mount them on some spears and put them up on the wall, dude. Come on.
Well, there's this place in Eastern Washington. I just was watching the guy Dan Richards, his thing. Well, they have the Wenatchee Point. Wenatchee is where my son lives, and that's where all those glacial erratic boulders are. But there's people like I just watched another video about people unearthing Clovis points, and I remember you, Kyle, telling me your stories of finding arrowheads and God, I want to go start. I need a whole nother lifetime to.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, bro! I
Dude.
can't. I love it so much. It's
Yeah.
just
Well, and I want to speak another language and play a musical instrument, but
same. I want to speak another language.
You get one.
Tell me real quick about these. I want to go through the rest of your art because it's
Yeah.
what is.
Well, these are just baskets, and these are a lot more contemporary. Some of the earlier ones look more baskety. My Aunt Fran James, or Chitapi, she was Chief Salit's mother and a big, weaving, like a cultural purveyor for our tribe, and there. I got a lot of encouragement from her to, kind of find my legs as an artist. It's, like I said, the intersection, the theme of my work is largely based on the tribal work. I get a lot of inspiration from the weavers or the carvers or, part of that story. But, I spent a long time just learning, like, it's a lot like I use the analogy of being in a band, and you guys are musicians, and it's like you like going to your kid's recital. Like, you can't just take a weekend workshop on playing a violin. And then it takes like 2 or 3 years before you take your fingers out of your ears, like, oh, hey, nice. You're playing other people's music. And then the next step from that is like writing your own music. And so that's a lot of like what glass art is like. You have to spend a lot of time learning these, like, not recreating other people's works, but like just figuring out the chords, and figuring out the fundamentals. And
You're
learning the theory and then learning how to apply the theory, and then
but this is like writing because you're taking other people's a different type of like something that they made or something that is in the stories or something ancient, and you're doing a modern representation of it. It's a visual and a tactile representation.
Yeah, you're like, those baskets you guys make out of grass?
Yeah.
I want to make them out of
Check it
glass.
Well, I like making things shiny and pretty. I'm a sucker for glass like that. But it's one of those things also where in the culture. So this is that piece that you're just on. This is a piece that my friend Richard Whiteley did, and there's another picture of him standing next to one for context. But again,
Wow,
it's
this is
just,
just he's playing with the light,
yeah,
like the translucence of the glass here.
makes the blocks. And I kind of put these images in. There's another picture of him standing next to it. But just as a frame of reference, like the Palomar lens, I mean, just hundreds of hours of cold working, just to polish something. And glass cuts so much easier than stone. Like,
So this is him dealing with one of these big blocks.
yeah, this is him. And he doesn't take it to a high polish, but he polishes them by hand. And it's literally like hundreds and hundreds of hours, dude. And if you're telling me they hand polished every one of the, like, it didn't take them hundreds of hours to polish.
Okay, I see what you're getting at. The glass is softer. He
Yeah.
spends hundreds of hours to polish this block, but we have tens of thousands of highly polished, much harder material
And if you look at this,
vases into complex shapes.
and if you looked at this with an electron microscope, you would see.
The scratches.
You would see it. Yeah. It's like that's the abrasive
Wow,
technique, and it's just hundreds and hundreds of hours. The Palomar lens, 13 years, man.
Look
Like,
at how serious this guy is, man.
full-time job. Yeah, he's an amazing artist. He's one of the guys at Corning. His name's Richard Whiteley. But just as a frame of reference, and that glass he's using is lead-based glass, so it's super soft. It's just like butter. You're like, oh man, great. Granite. I've tried polishing. I don't have my necklace on, but I carve a little bit of stone too. I've carved like jade, and these are like things that are like 7 on the Mohs scale, 6. That's twice as hard as glass, or I don't know exactly where it is, but it's so hard to polish. We have the best polishing equipment we've ever had. We have this new thing for polishing stuff called Trizac, which is like this friction based. It's like a composite material. Like the abrasive mediums have changed so much. There's these wheels from the Eastern Europe Czech called pulper wheels, which are like instead of electroplated into metal like diamonds on the surface of a cutting edge, it's like a foam that's so hard that's just impregnated with an abrasive, and it just wears away as they do it. And I've used all these things on stone, dude. It doesn't polish, man. It just like, it doesn't, dude. Like it's so much more effort. And when there's a picture in that Dropbox, and I'm touching. There's that one of my favorite parts. What's that? Luxor. That's where it was. And there's like you and me and Chris and Ben. We're all kind of looking at the flutes on the skirt, like the lines on the triangle dress skirts that they were wearing, and
On
how
the
they
statues,
would meet the belt. And there are these like little undulations, these flutes that come up to this perfect, like they take a semicircle like this channel that runs all the way up to this very flat surface, and it's like a perfectly 90-degree meeting point, and there's no imperfection. It's just like you almost like stuck them together, and then it's like polished in the crate like how, like what? And then I've got my hand like behind, like up inside, there's a cavity of the
How dare you?
and I'm like touching behind it, and it's polished inside. It's just like between the toes, man. Like how? Why?
Yeah.
Like, this is so crazy, man.
Yeah.
There were two. Do you remember the two different sort of qualities of statue?
Yes,
you could tell how round, like the fingers, but it was polished. Like they were so perfectly round. The knuckles were round. Everything was polished. And then there was the other kind where the fingers were sort of flat with just sort of grooves scratched between.
Yeah, they carved a square,
They carved a square,
and
and then they scratched a groove in here.
3
and
lines.
and then and those statues, when you looked at the skirting, when you looked up those lines, they were all squiggly and they didn't really match. The legs were too big for the bodies.
Yeah.
The how far it went around to the arm didn't go in as deep.
Well,
It just kind of like they just kind of made a little impression.
Yeah.
The musculature too, like even though it's skin, like the subtle musculature, like I mean you don't need to be an artist to see that. It's like the pro, like it's just amazing. I was just and we even at the museum. So you guys, did you
Telling you what, the superintendent at Luxor was just like, I knew we should not have hired Johnson Statues Incorporated for the second half of the statue.
Yeah,
They might have been expensive, but those first ones we ordered were fantastic.
that's right.
Dude, well, how much time did they have, man? And that's the craziest question right there. It's like,
I don't know.
Yeah, they hired Cargo Cult Statues Incorporated, and those guys were good.
Yeah.
But Johnson and Johnson statues to do the second half of the job, not a good job. Yeah, and
Huge mistake.
huge mistake. And I agree, and people point to like the later the Greek stuff, but they were cutting in marble, which it's beautiful work.
yeah,
And in some cases, that's like there's a famous one. It's like the woman's face behind the veil,
yeah,
and this is done in stone, and it's like they made this. It looks like transparent, like a veil over this person's face. You're just like, that's amazing, right?
Yeah.
But it isn't. The musculature is all there, and you can see it when you're moving. You in the highlights of the light, just like when you're in these museums, you move back and forth, and you see the reflections of the light in the polish move across the ribs, for example, on one of the seated Sphinx statues or something like that. You can't see it otherwise, right? It's so subtle that it's almost not there, and that might just be because the museum is dark, right? But when you move back and forth,
So would have the temple would have been.
right, the temple would be or whatever, but you move back and forth and you see the polish, and it does this in these Greek statues, but that Sphinx is cut in like a black, like diorite granite,
yeah.
whereas these beautiful Greek statues are in marble, which is way softer. It's far softer.
And they bring up the point. It's like, well, it's the material. They're just so much more familiar with stonework than we are because it was their everything.
That's what yeah.
And so I mean, I can see some of that, like in glassmaking. The big history comes from Venice. The 16th century goblets were still like, these guys were making it with wood fire. They had no torches, and they could make things that we could barely. I respect the hand craftsman, but just the amount and the scale, the physics of the thing. It seems so inconsistent. Like, even if Johnson rolls in there and the deadline is by the end of the week, Johnson, you got to stay up all night. Those are just not even the same thing, you know what I mean? It's kind of apples and oranges when you're.
Well, I have a question for you. As you make stuff by hand, so would it? Because I've heard this from people saying that the Greek statues, because they were wearing these flowing robes and everything, they didn't really have. They didn't deal with symmetry too much. Like they allowed for this, like the robes and everything are a major part of, like, you don't really need a whole lot of symmetry, and their positions are all in action poses. So there's not a whole lot of symmetry. But in some of these Egyptian sculptures, the lion, sitting down, this one paw is exactly the same size as this one, and their back legs are exactly the same on either side. All the ribs are cut the same. So there is like a bilateral symmetry in these.
Yeah, the only part that's not symmetrical is the tail. Like everything else, you could cut it down the middle.
So as a glass blower, would it be easier to make something that was just all curves and asymmetrical, or to try to get some kind of bilateral symmetry in a handmade object?
That's what I was going to point at too, and it's like, I'm just bringing up something that other people have pointed out, but like, the Chris Dunn's work with statues of Ramesses being like symmetrical, like that's just, you don't see that anywhere. I mean, anybody who's ever tried to, when you're learning how to draw, and then okay, as a sculptor myself, I'm like, okay, when I go for an eye, I gotta like make the other eye look right, and when you start getting down to it,
you always get that first eye really good. You're like, yes,
first eye, dude. Anybody that's and you're going for the second one, and it's like, God, if I could have just cut the first one out, if you cut this in half, but then this person image thing, it's like, anybody that's tried to draw.
I'm not intending to draw people like seriously on the spectrum, but
yeah.
That's what happens.
It's 100% more difficult, and the kind of material that I sculpt in, it's easier. I don't go for super. There's a kind of glass sculpting where they go for the super realistic. Laura actually sent me. There's this people called the Blauschkas that did these scientific neotides and plant life and molecular. These tiny little they're in the Corning and they're really old, and they did this lamp working, but they're in the Met. The Blauschkas, just look up Blauschka, like lampwork glass.
Oh, okay.
It's like perfectly anatomically correct, but I mean, nature isn't even symmetrical like that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's like the flaw.
That's what's so odd about some of the statues and the sculptures in Egypt.
And because
they're like alien because they're too symmetrical.
And they pay such attention to detail, like you said, but there's proportion, like some symmetry, yes, but proportionally, there's something just off about it too. You know what I mean? Like sometimes I feel like their chests are a little different, or like the proportions like don't.
Well, just Akhenaten for one.
Akhenaten
is way
as
off.
like what I teach people periodically glass as a sculptor. One of the first things, like as a painter, you draw your hand, sculpt your hand. You can learn a lot. Everybody's got one, and I'm not saying that we can all see the Fibonacci sequence, but when I tell people as an assignment to like sculpt a hand, I'm like, everyone has one, so you've got a model. And even though all of our hands look different, when there's the tiniest bit out of proportion, your eye goes right to it. It's a really tricky thing to sculpt is a hand, because like we all know when it doesn't, there's just, what do they call the uncanny valley? It's like,
yes, the uncanny valley. Yeah,
something just doesn't line up.
It's really close to being right,
and that's
that
what
makes
I feel
it creepy.
Yeah, that's what I feel about the Egyptian things. You know what I mean? They're just like piercing, and it's it's so perfect. Like there's just something different about it. You know what I mean? Like it just
Their hands are like perfect guy made of liquid metal hands. Like no wrinkles, they're just, I don't know what it is. It's like it's weird.
Right. And also
faces.
Some of those statues are like the pieces of it. Like there was one in there's an arm in the London Museum, just the shoulder.
Oh yeah.
Right to here. And you could kind of walk around the whole thing and just absolute beautiful, the musculature, just this arm, with the fist at the end of it. Yeah. And you're just like, this is weird, right? Just polished, shiny, and strange. And you imagine it's put on the whole rest of the statue. And like, I know what you're saying with the chest and everything. And I always think to myself, well, they're meant to be viewed from, 40 feet below. So the chest is like this, it's going to be foreshortened. So they make it, I don't know. A bunch of it's like that, where they have this weird smile, but when you actually look at them standing up, they don't look like they're smiling.
Oh, that's the uncanny valley thing I think about.
Yeah.
Their expression.
Yeah.
What was that place we were walking around? It was like the Boneyard, and they're like, "Oh, check out the thumb." Karnak, dude, with a huge tube drill up like 40 feet or whatever.
Oh yeah, yep. That's in granite.
In that gate.
Yeah,
God,
that granite gate. Yeah,
that gate was just ridiculous. Can you imagine? It's like I'm riding my camel, dude. Back in the day.
Right.
It's like, don't shoot me with your laser eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally. I mean, and it's like, if it was for a wow factor, it's like it could be half as big. You know what I mean? I'm just gonna do what these guys say. Take my camel, let me keep my water, and like.
What about that story about Samson, right? This guy that like he carries the gates of the city away on his back.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like all these gates.
He's got the haircut, right?
Yeah.
Yes, he's the one with the hair. Like all these cities with gates you go into from the ancient world, you're just like, no one's
carrying this gate.
This is impossible. Like there's not a gate. There's not a city gate yet.
Well,
that I've seen that a single person could carry away on their backs.
And I've seen you guys mention it, and it has obviously, but that tube drill, that's a riddle.
Yeah.
Anything that big around, that big a circumference, that much force to turn it, that friction to, fly a drone in a scanner, whatever up in there, there's something there. And then that,
I wish we could.
The hand with, and all the include, like the conglomerate, that's what you're calling it, right? The
aggregate,
that conglomerate statue that was busted apart over there that had the giant
where you can see the thumb.
Yeah.
It's holding the whatever those are, the shamir tools.
I think that one is It's a conglomerate, like a hard sandstone, because it's almost all like quartz
Yeah, it's a
grains,
hard sandstone with
like
big,
flint.
yeah,
big chunks of flint all in it.
yeah. It's like got river gravel in it.
It's wild.
And
Yeah.
so that is the one that you would take to the electron microscope as like, look at this plane between these two pieces. Like, where's
Yeah.
the inaccuracy? Like that was like that right there. Pardon me, is like where we find abrasive evidence. You know, it should be all over that, right? Because one stone softer, one stone. It's not like they switched material between the two, right?
Yeah.
And if they don't cut, and if they don't cut it, if the hardness is different, they don't cut it the same, right? And so when you're removing more of the harder material, you'll create a valley in the softer material. It's not like
If you're not careful, yeah.
It's not like you could adjust for pressure over that micro distance. You know what I mean? That I think would be a great little electron microscope.
We should grab that thumb.
Yeah, just throw that.
Take it with us.
Just take the thumb.
Can you imagine? Just trying to get, like, I just need to go put this in an electron microscope. This thumb.
And I feel like so much is like mounting, like with your guys' work, and just this atmosphere or people like. So, what are the latest things out of each? Like, when will the Ministry of Antiquities be forced to like give the dog a bone, or like?
Well, I think some good things are happening. I think really good things are happening. A big part of it, I think, is this. I don't know what started this or how it got going, but the Scan Pyramids project has been like, yeah, this is the kind of stuff we've just loved this whole development with them, and they're doing more and more projects. Every time we go there, we find them like in their teams with tents out on these awesome sites, and they're doing some kind of work out there. They're running GPR. They're doing whatever. They're scanning the sides of pyramids.
Yeah, you got to get those guys Instagram.
Yeah, they're great, and I think, so that to me is a really good sign. And always, these things happen very slowly.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like it's kind of been a pretty fast-paced situation. I mean, like we've seen, a new Minister of Antiquities.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen the Scan Pyramids project start, and like they're expanding their projects. So I don't know. I feel like there is some opening up, and I think
there's also some stuff that is not cool, like what they've done to the basalt pavement in front of the Great Pyramid.
It's horrible.
I
was trying to be positive,
like repairing it more, and it's covering up a lot of the saw cuts and the other marks that we have.
I hate that job. Whoever is in charge of that,
it's terrible.
No,
and they're doing some of this at other stuff, but I agree. There's good things and there's bad things. But yeah, Scan Pyramids, like this is work by engineers and like computer guys, right? Like
I'm talking guys. Generally like moving the science and discovery forward. Rebuilding the basalt pavement doesn't have anything to do with moving the science and discovery forward. That's just strictly tourism.
Backwards. Yeah.
Purely tourism.
Yeah.
Like what the Scan Pyramids project guys are doing is like, that's a different situation.
Well, and hopefully that's available to people, that data, the void and all that stuff. What were you guys talking about last time? They were going to do some work. Is it Menkare's pyramid? And then they stopped because people are like, well, you can't redo this.
Yeah, they had a plan.
They said we're going to rebuild it. Yeah.
They were going to rebuild it. Man, if it was anything like the basalt pavement, it would have been a disaster.
Yeah.
Well, and I heard they like cut down the trees over Göbekli Tepe recently, that they were planted on top of it, if that was a thing.
I've heard that there's a conspiracy that it's illegal to cut the trees down, which is why they planted them.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's all BS. The trees aren't in the way of any of the major digs that are going on, and if they were, they're not very big. They're olive trees. They're very shallow rooted. They can be transplanted like fairly easily.
And people who only see stuff online, it's hard to know what to see.
I know, but there's been a lot about, there's been a lot about conspiracy theories about the digging at Göbekli Tepe, and I have reason to believe that none of it's true.
Okay.
Like they're still digging there, they're still doing excavations there. The olive trees have been there for a long time, and they, if the government wants to remove olive trees, they can. Like there's nothing keeping them from taking out some trees.
Well, it's not people obfuscating research, right? That's what you would hope is the last. And
Yeah, I think kind of where they're at right now is that they've basically allocated enough of the site to where their digs are located, and they may still be doing work at those dig sites. But everything else, they're not going to mess with for a while. There's plenty of other sites that need to be dug to like kind of check against the discoveries of Göbekli Tepe. Like, are they similar? Are they the same ages, or did they some older, younger? And which they are doing now with Karahan Tepe. There's a lot of work going on at Karahan, and it's an older site.
Yeah.
And it's great because that guy, the guy that's the head of Karahan Tepe, has like major disagreements on a lot of the fundamental concepts with the people that are, the Germans that are in charge of the Göbekli Tepe site. He's just like, no, I think you're wrong. I think it was this.
Yeah, so
which is great.
Keep that happening.
Yes, let them. We need them to argue, to debate, so that it's not like they're presenting like a wall of consensus. All of this is new, and the argument in the with the anthropologists and the archaeologists is great.
Apparently, there's some new T-pillar sites that have been discovered fairly recently, a couple of them, and so I mean, we may see, in the next decade, like multiple of these sites becoming open and having some excavation areas. They're not all going to be completely excavated. These are massive sites. They're just they're so enormous. Yeah. The idea of excavating the entire thing is just it would be mind-boggling too. It would be too much to handle. Like where would you build the museums to put all the stuff that you found? Where would the dirt go? You're gonna just pour it into the neighbor's farm?
Yeah, well,
I don't know where the dirt would go if you excavated the entirety of Göbekli Tepe. Where would you put it? You'd have to truck it away, and then did you sift it properly, or I don't know.
Yeah,
it's like what's going on at Göbekli Tepe?
It's like Pompeii. They're still doing work there.
Yeah. But you could think about like if you went on to an Indian mound, you might dig like a little pothole and sift the layers and check to see like what types of flints and lithics do you find all the way down, or beads or anything else that you could kind of get a stratification of dating or some information, some data out of. If you went over and dug another one, a couple of yards away, and then you took that data and compared it, and it's like pretty much the same. It's like, okay, we don't need to dig the entire freaking mound. We can take these two little holes that we've dug and basically kind of get an idea of the site, generally speaking.
I agree with that. But I will say this. If it really is like the dawn of the megalithic age, then maybe you should dig the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree with that too. If it's a building, if it's a temple, you can't dig up the first room and be like, okay, we understand.
Yeah, we basically have the idea.
Like you need to dig up all the rooms. I get that. Yeah. I totally get that. Which is fine, but if there were freaking dozens of other ones, it'd be kind of like, okay, we've done 30 or 40 years of work
before we dig this one
on this one. Like we should start doing some stuff on some other sites.
Yeah.
I feel like so much is still unknown about them, and that's kind of like what's great about what you guys are doing is sharing some of this. And like when you talk about how it's such a big undertaking, like when they first cleared the Sphinx and then it like filled back in, like it just I can't imagine, the amount of funding in this day and age to do what it is. What is the one where there's the labyrinth underwater because of
Hawara.
Like,
God,
it's just like
who knows what's in there.
Teardrop, dude. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and the Osirian, the same thing. We go almost every time we go. The archaeologists there are like okay, we're doing some work, and they've got a little crane, and they've moved a couple.
They've got a little bit more.
Yeah, they've moved some blocks. They've pulled some stuff out of there. They're like the water's going down. They're like we're running the pumps, but the concept of those guys at the snail's pace they're moving, like actually excavating all 30 meters of this structure. It's never going to happen.
Yeah,
They're gonna get so far, and then eventually something will happen, and they'll turn the pumps off, and
Yeah,
it'll
it'll
just
all
fill back up with
and then
water.
the sand will blow in, and it'll fill up with silt. It'll be exactly.
just draining the pond with a thimble. So
Yeah, exactly.
you guys have been to Turkey twice now, is that right?
Just once. We
once.
did 2 tours there back to back, but we only
Okay.
one time. Yeah.
Did you guys go to the underground city place?
We're going next time.
Zoroastrian, or Darren Q, is that what it is?
Yeah, Darren QU, which may be the Varas of Zoroastrian legend.
Of Zoroaster,
of
Ahura Mazda,
Ahura
my great
Mazda.
master.
Yeah.
Ahura Mazda.
Farina.
Well, and you guys have like done this greatest hits like playlist of all these places. Like, are there some? What's like where else? I mean, obviously you want to go to Peru and spend his where like do you Yanaguni or the what's that?
Yep.
Oh yeah,
Danny Nadatawawa. I don't know where.
Oh, Danny Najata. Yes, you're talking about the place in Indonesia, Gunung Padang.
Gunung Padang. That's it.
Yes, we want to go there. Yeah, so Ben and Kyle and I have like what we call like a dream dive tour.
Yeah.
Which is like, if we can put this together, first we have to train a bunch of people to dive. So, if we can put this thing together where Ben has the whole thing planned out, we'll do a big circle. But we would go to Yonaguni, do some diving, off of Indonesia, but he has the whole thing planned out. And I want to dive off of Nan Madol because half of that place is also underwater. There's giant basalt structures and columns stacked up beneath the ocean.
Where is that?
Off of that island? It's in Oceania, the island of Pompeii.
Oh, wow.
Nan Madol. It's made, somebody made they took columnar basalt and stacked it up like Lincoln logs and made these massive structures, and half of it's underwater. I mean, the whole place is built on artificially constructed land. First of all, somebody brought millions of tons of stone and poured it into the bay and then built a city on top of it. And half the city is now underwater. So, it's like, how old is this really?
Yeah.
And who did this and when?
And when you just start talking about millions of tons of stone, I'm like, even in my small, I can have a farmette, in my tiny little tractor, and I'm
farmette
things, and I'm like, dude, how do you, like isn't Malta, you guys, the cart ruts too? Isn't there a lot of that underwater too, or they go in right into
some of the cart ruts go underwater into the bay next to Malta and cross it and go up on other islands. Yeah, it's weird.
There's so much to find underwater. Yeah, I need to learn how to dive. I feel like that'd be a good
diving is fun.
When I'm done with my second language and musical instrument. But so you guys learned pretty quickly. Well, you guys had just started doing that too, right?
It was basically 2 weekends.
Yeah, okay.
Or was it? It was 2 or 3 weekends.
Okay.
3 weekends. We 1 weekend to take the to sit in the class and do the reading and and then take a written test, and then 2 weekends to get the dive.
2 dives.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
So they were each 1 day, I think, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Four dives they counted as 2 dives per day.
2 dives per day. So it was 2 weekends, but really 1 day per weekend. So it wasn't even the whole weekend.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was not that much. I mean, if you want to get certified for something, diving's probably one of the easier ones.
Yeah. Not cheap, but it was fun.
So much to see, being on another planet, right? That's
yeah, bro. I gotta go. We were talking about the Great Lakes, and it's like, man, there's some ancient, Native American freaking what did they call it? Drive lanes where they were driving the caribou, and they had built they put these big standing stones in a row to hide themselves, and then they built blinds out of stone. And they built a stone
drop
wall.
45 drive lane.
They dropped 45 drive lane. They built a stone wall to drive the caribou along this wall and direct them into a specific area, and then they would just jump out and ambush them.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's like the whole area is buried, and it's on a ridge line that used to be an actual ridge line that in their day, and now it's 130 feet underwater in the Great Lakes.
Oh, that's crazy. And to think about, I do love the Younger Dryas and the Missoula flood and Randall, a lot of that sort of stuff. I am just curious.
Oh man, that stuff's fascinating.
Being from America, just what in America, you know what I mean? we're talking about all these places around the world, like the wall in Montana. I would like to know more about,
Oh yeah, Sage Wall. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be, I don't know. I know that's on private land though, right?
Yep. But the owners apparently are interested as well. So,
Hmm.
work is being done there. It's
So what
cool. Our
Yellowstone?
buddy Michael from Wandering Wolf has gone there multiple times. And
You could, I'm just thinking about like you could do what Darren does. You could just be like, "This is my land." Just
yeah,
walk out.
just walk out there and claim that it's yours.
Visiting the ancestors. He's not too far from Montana too, right?
What? Who?
Darren, I think he's on the
No,
other. He crosses
yeah,
over Montana.
I don't remember how far it is, but he's driven down to the Scablands multiple times.
Yeah.
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 The I would like to see more about that, and I think when you start talking about things being this old, like Egypt's in Egypt, like I said, not with no disrespect, I just feel like we're talking about things that are so old, like the permanent residence of an area, like it. I don't know. It's hard to say. Like I just feel like history's sake, when we talk about like museums repatriating things, I think that some of that is good too. But I also think that thank God for the Petrie Museum giving you guys, provenance or whatever. Like, if it's for the greater, not, you know what I mean? It's the weapon of the greater good is something you always have to be careful of, like the greater
Yes.
good
Yeah, that's right.
is communism, but at the same time, like this shared history, if we're just talking about to the 70,000 year bottleneck, like, I mean, just for humanity's sake, I mean, I'm not trying to claim anyone's land, I don't want anybody taking my land and I don't want to claim anyone else's land, but I just feel like these are a shared history of humanity that, nobody has
I
a
agree.
monopoly
Yeah.
on history,
Yeah. This pyramid is now the property of the proletariat, comrade.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I agree that in some cases, repatriation is a good idea.
Yeah.
I think that it can be a good way to become friends or become allies. It can be a gesture of good faith. Since we have so many differences and so many conflicts, but I don't also begrudge the people in the past for going abroad and finding amazing things and bringing them back and building beautiful buildings to preserve them and show them off and tell where they came from and what it was about. I mean,
especially when that kind of reverence for the past didn't exist in the place they got it from at the time.
Yeah.
But now that it does, repatriation in some cases
yeah,
is
I
good.
mean, like let's build goodwill, right?
Yeah.
So that we can learn more and all that kind of stuff. So I'm all about that, but I don't think it's a necessity, and I don't begrudge the people for building museums and bringing beautiful artifacts to them.
I don't either. And
In some cases, maybe it was done in bad faith and it could have been stolen, which, hey, that wasn't the modern people.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot in museums myself about my own culture, see my artifacts of my great grandfather. And I feel like they do belong in a museum, as much as I would love to have them, or, some other family heirlooms are like in my aunt's closet and she's fighting with like half the family and no one has, could see them anyway. I think that some of these things are out there, and I don't think I could understand why Egyptian people are really protective of, what is their identity or their legacy. And no one likes to be told like, well, you thought you were right about this, but you know what I mean? And it's, I think, like you said, trying to build those relationships. When I heard that Graham had made up with Zahi Hawass, I mean, from whatever, I'm like, from a very far distance in the soap opera, watching this thing unfold, I like the idea of, I mean, think about the things that Zahi, like if he could just take things with a grain of salt. And I don't mean to vilify the guy, but it's really easy for me when I see like, what Graham has gone through. I'm like, this guy, I feel like he's kind of up against the wall, and he's just trying to get things out, just to have questions, to like science, just to question things, like the science is settled has never been the right answer for anything. I don't know anything that it is.
That's right.
Yeah.
Science is the ongoing debate, like the live, living, breathing thing, So
I thought the Zahi Graham thing recently was actually quite good.
yeah, me too. I was hopeful.
I thought that was a really good thing, and it made me gain respect for Zahi.
For real.
I mean, before that, like we've been pretty critical, of him and the management of the Department of Antiquities.
I think the person he really hates is Robert Bauval.
Yes, and that's exactly what happened, right? Like that was the whole deal, but still, that made me gain respect for him. I was happy about that. So I think that's good. And that shows that he's, all of this stuff that Graham's looked into, including Robert Bauval's work. That's kind of a way of him saying like, hey, that's okay. That's cool. And that's, I don't know. I feel like from a public official, who is head of the Department of Antiquities to do something like that publicly is a big step.
Mm-hmm.
He's not the head anymore, but he was for a long time. He's
pretty much still has all
powerful,
the power.
He's still a very powerful figure there.
He can get anybody fired that he wants, pretty much.
Yeah, I'm sure he's on the board.
He's on the board, exactly.
Yeah, so I think that's a big move.
I would also say that in general, I feel like that there are a lot of Egyptologist academics that are Egyptian, that are far more open to changing the narrative about Egypt than Western archaeology is.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're more open to it over there than most of Western archaeology. I think Western archaeology is what is actually has been keeping the standard model where it is on Egyptology for so long. They put it there in the first place, and they've been holding it there for 200 years.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that in Egypt, and Ben has talked about this too. He's like, we're trying to encourage like Egyptians to pick up this, like the vase thing. Like, look at this, like no Western archaeologist will even look, or anthropologist will even consider this data. You guys need to do it. This is your heritage, No
one likes to be told what to think,
Right.
Like you.
But I think I think that the Egyptians are in some cases more open to it.
Yeah, well, and when they're presented with the evidence and then they're told to think something else.
No
one likes to be told what to. You're like,
I see what you mean. Yeah.
All right, I can learn for myself. So, did you guys go to the new Egyptian museum?
Not yet. We're going next month.
We're gonna.
I heard what was he was saying that Ben cracked a funny. He was saying that the Egyptian museum took longer to build than the pyramids.
Yeah. And it's already falling apart. Yeah.
I'd like to go see that.
Yeah.
Not sure when I make it back there.
Yeah. Shall we wrap it up, dude?
Yeah. Man.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. So, okay.
Do you want to do a Patreon?
What's that?
Just a short Patreon segment after the show.
We could talk about some really weird stuff.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Yeah, we should do a Patreon segment.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, cool. We'll end the show. Yep. Tell people where they can find your work.
Yeah, FridayGlass.com, Dan Friday, Instagram. The internet knows how to find me,
Okay, I'll put it in the show notes too. FridayGlass.com and Dan Friday on Instagram. Awesome, dude. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the show, bro. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, fellas.
All right.
Thanks, buddy.
For all you listeners out there, we love you guys.
Always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.